process really was that as coaches we put a list of players initially, which was about 60 players that we thought were in contention for the squad, and then the last few weeks when we sort of met a couple of times was trying to narrow down positionally just who were the loose head props, who were the second rows, who were the back row that we thought were in contention, and sort of narrowed that down uh, without finalising sort of numbers, and then really the squad was announced. Probably a final decision was the day before that the squad was announced that we actually did finalise or come to an agreement. There was some lively discussion, some lively debate amongst the coaches, and there's six of us who are doing that. And if you look at the experience, and obviously with Graham Roundtree playing in the front row, and Steve Borthwick with the second rowers as well, and Rob Howley with the nines and tens, and Neil Jenkins as well. So we felt like all of us. It was pretty important that everyone felt that they had an input in terms of selection, and it definitely was. I'd like to think a consensus on the final decision. A couple of really tough calls, but definitely the six of us having I'd like to think an equal input into the final squad selection. We won't make a public standby list because potentially that could change, in terms of what happens on tour. We've got in our minds players to cover in certain positions, and having had those conversations already, we've got a list in our mind, and we wouldn't be a bit unfair to make that list sort of public, because then on tour you never know what's going to happen, and things do change, and and we won't. We'll talk to the coaches about the possibility of the players that we're looking to come in if we do pick up injuries. And if you imagine traditionally the Lions pick up between 6 to 10 sort of players. So in terms of injuries, so there will be some players that we're going to need over the next few weeks. I don't think it was. I think 2013 wasn't that we picked too many Welshmen. I think there was a bit of a contentious issue over the selection of the third test in terms of how many Welsh started. But yeah, you go back to 1993 and 12 Englishmen started the last test in New Zealand, and no one said a word. It just, I think it's social media these days, and I look back in 2013. It wasn't the fact that those players started the first test. It was, you look who finished the third test and brought that team home. So look, it's not about proving anyone right or wrong. It's about collectively making what we think are the right decisions. And the great thing about this whole process is that everyone has an opinion, and everyone's opinion is different. And I respect that and understand that. And people are going to disagree with myself and disagree with the other coaches and selectors, and there's going to be different opinions in terms of the test side that's picked out in New Zealand in terms of the first second. But that's the beauty of sport, and that's what makes it so interesting and so exciting, that people do have different opinions from myself. And it doesn't mean that I'm right all the time. We question ourselves in terms of, do we get the right decisions and make the right calls, and often it does provoke a bit of interest when someone comes up with a different point of view. It does make you think, and look, I have no problem with people disagreeing with the calls and the selections that we've made. I think from my point of view, someone like Sam, having done the job in 2013, is an ideal person to lead the Lions. The thing about the Lions is, ironically, it might be a little bit easier than captaining your own home nation team, because of the experience and the leadership that you have from players around you. And one of the things that I admire about Sam is him as a person, him as an individual. It's not about Sam Warburton. It's not about the ego in terms of being the Lions captain. If a selection's made or a call's made, or we come to the tests and someone in his position is playing better than him, he's the first person who would have no problem with that, because it's about putting the team first. And that's why I respect and admire him so much, more as a person than as a rugby player. I think he's a fantastic rugby player. I think he'll do a good job on tour as a captain, having experienced that in 2013, and I'm sure the senior players or experienced players in the squad will give him a huge amount of support and encouragement, and hopefully make that easy for him. It's a really good question in terms of Bolter. I think it's going to be more difficult to pick someone as a real outsider. Look, it's not um, outside the realms of possibility, but yeah, there was a couple of calls and one or two surprise selections that people didn't expect in the squad with someone like Jared Payne and Ross Moriarty. But we felt that Jared's experience in having won some big games in an Irish jersey and experience the sort of rugby in New Zealand was would be a benefit to the Lions, and Ross had a couple of huge impact or sort of games that he played exceptionally well for Wales and that. So they were probably the two surprise selections in a lot of people's minds. But bringing someone out of the blue or an uncapped player, probably in today's sort of rugby, like you said, there's so much scrutiny on players and statistical analysis and numbers and stuff. It's probably unlikely that someone's going to be a real bolter sort of go in the future, which it's probably sad really. It's I can understand someone and the romantic sort of view about picking someone that people haven't heard about or really unexpected, and that's been done in the past, and I fully appreciate people wanting to have that sort of opinion, but the reality is it's probably unlikely. Yeah, we definitely look at the performance stats, and in terms of the weighting that they have, they're a backup to what we know about the player. There are lots of other things that when we're selecting a player, it's looking very much about what sort of character they are, what sort of personality they have, and in terms of are they a good tourist, are they a good team person, how they're going to take disappointment if they're left out of the squad. So a lot of those things, sort of definitely are things that we discuss when finalising a player in the squad, and then looking at the backup of the stats and the numbers that probably from us is first of all talking about the player, getting a feel of what we are, and they're just a backup in terms of the numbers. I mean, the thing about statistics is that you don't want paralysis by analysis, and I think that's something that's important in the modern game. Look, Joe was incredibly unlucky. There was for us, it was probably the one position where we felt we had a huge amount of strength and depth, and looked at the balance in terms of making the final selection, and it was a long debate with the coaches and with Steve Borthwick as well, in terms of his experience in that role, and we looked at the balance of the second rows that we had, and players with the ability to play in the middle of the line out, to call the line out, and then just give us that sort of balance. And it was a real toss up in terms of that final decision, and Joe was incredibly unlucky to be left out of the squad. That's a real challenge in trying to bring the players together from the Four Nations in such a short period. I mean, they bash the hell out of each other for in club rugby and regional rugby and Pro 12 and the Aviva Premiership, and then the Six Nations, and then you've got to bring them together in such a short period, and that's one of the biggest challenges. And having had long chats in the past with someone like Ian McGeechan, who's probably the master of that, and the things that I learned from him is about the Lions, very much his ethos and belief is that you get things right off the field and you've got a good chance of getting things right on the field. So there's a lot of things to be able to do with that, in terms of players rooming together, getting to know each other, without being stupid, trying to have a night or two out just to be able to socialise together and to do that. And then one of the other things is from a coaching perspective is not looking as though we've made up our mind early on in the tour what we think the test side is going to be, and sort of saying to the players with, there's not a 100% guarantee, but we did that in 2013, and everyone got a start in the first 3 games. And as a player, on tour, you feel like if you get a start and you're going to get a start, at least I'll put myself in the shop window and give myself a bit of a chance, and with a bit of luck the team goes well, and maybe I'm in contention. And with this squad, we feel like we've got so much depth, so much competition, when at the moment in our minds we're not sure who's number 1, number 2 or number 3 in certain positions. And So that's going to be a real challenge for us. The competitiveness is going to be absolutely huge, but bringing that team together from the Four Nations is going to be hugely important for us to get things right, to make sure that we hopefully can perform on the field, which is going to be the most important thing. The understanding and continuity it's about us putting the game together. We've got a couple of 4-day camps. We're in Wales for 4 days, which, looking at the moment, we'll probably have about 12, maybe 13 if we're lucky in the 4 days in Wales, sort of that 14th of May for about 4 days. So a little bit of work with those players in terms of some understanding. Then the following week in Ireland we have another 4-day camp, and I think we'll have 20 odd players. So again, sort of putting a little bit of meat on the bones in terms of calls and understanding and stuff for those, potentially that sort of half the squad. And then the challenge then is bringing everyone together after the two finals, before we fly to New Zealand, and maybe without being too interfering in terms of we understand that the players have got some important games coming up in terms of Europe and semi-finals and finals of the domestic competition. So we'd be very careful about how much information from the Lions that we give. We've got a day on the 8th of May, which we call it, just where the whole squad comes together, but it's actually not a coaching day. It's where we've got to, do a lot of the commercial stuff and players try on all the gear, make sure everything fits. A lot of signing to do, a lot of interviews to do. So, and from a team point of view, it's a chance for us to lay out the schedule and the expectations, and from a coaching perspective, what I expect from them on tour as well. So in terms of continuity, I think we've got 16 from 2013 players that have toured in the past, and we've looked at some combinations of players that have played together, and then some of the continuity of the staff as well. I think that potentially makes a little bit of difference to short circuit what's going to be pretty tough when you imagine that we fly to New Zealand on the Monday, we arrive on the Wednesday, and then the first game's 2 days later or 3 days later on the Saturday, and that's a massive challenge for us. Oh, I don't believe you can have too many. I mean, I think that's I'd rather a side talk and spoke too much. I mean, the chat is so important in that it's not just speaking and talking for the sake of it, but it's about communication and particularly communication from the outside, and it's really, really important, and groups working together. So the front row are chatting, the second rows are talking, the back row, the 9s and 10s. So all the combinations in terms of that, they're all talking and communicating and feeding everything back in. So one of the challenges of international rugby is that sometimes one of the goals, particularly when you're playing Southern Hemisphere teams and playing teams like Australia or South Africa or New Zealand, is that the challenge is, can you out-talk them? Because they are very vocal on the field, and often being vocal is a sign of confidence as well. That you're displaying, that you're understanding what you're doing, you're communicating, you're talking about which player you've got defensively or which player you're looking to attack from an offensive point of view. So very much the chat is incredibly important, and that communication from everyone does send a really positive message. Yeah, I probably from my experience from the last two tours, in terms you talk about the quality of opposition. I mean, I think the only thing that the Lions have done from 2009 into 2013 and now to 2017, I think it's the only team that gives you a benchmark about how the game's changing. Because I think when you go from year to year, and we don't realise what the changes are in the game. But I could not believe from 2009 to 2013 the physicality of the game and how much that had changed. So seeing how that potentially happens from 2013 to 2017 is an interesting sort of aspect that I'm looking forward to seeing. Yes, New Zealand is going to be incredibly tough, we know that, but from a preparation point of view, I'm really excited about that, because 2009 and 2013 we had games there where we had won by 50, 60, 70 points, and from that point of view, that's not great preparation going into a test match. So you want to be challenged, you want to be playing some really, really tough competitive rugby, and New Zealand's definitely going to do that for us. So look, it's right about getting the combinations right, it's also important to win and get some confidence and belief and some momentum in doing that to particularly going into the first test. But New Zealand is about, and as Australia was in 2013, it's about the Test series. It's about winning that. And if we drop a game or two because we're trying something different or trying different combination, it won't be the end of the world, But we need to. I realise it is important that we win games and we create confidence and momentum. But dropping a game or two and winning the Test series, will be. I'd take that any day, because that's what it's about. It's about winning the Test series and returning with a Lions victory. Oh, I'd be disappointed if we, didn't see smaller players, being able to be involved in the game, and yeah, it's not just rugby. There's a lot of modern sport where you see the physicality of players, and there's often that the phrase, a big good man's going to always be a good little man, So look, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But one of the ethos of rugby, it's supposed to be, it's a game for all shapes and sizes, and that's the first thing that it's paramount in terms of that. And the last thing I would like to see as a coach, players with the ability and footwork and speed, and because they weren't the biggest individual not to be considered. And if you look back and players like Shane Williams, he wasn't the biggest man in the world, but pound for pound he's incredibly powerful and very, very explosive. And even though they sometimes are not the biggest in stature, you don't realise just how incredibly powerful and skillful, and going into contact, the difference that they make, and sometimes more of an impact than a big man can make. So look, the game needs players of different sizes and different abilities as well, and I think it's important that we make sure that we recognise that going forward. Look, definitely. I mean, the challenge for us is the players involved in semi-finals and finals of domestic competition. They've got to get up to speed pretty quickly. So the two camps that we're involved in, probably will prepare most of those players to start in the first game, and then when the other players come together, it was a real challenge for them in terms of getting to know the calls in such a short period, running some team stuff, some training together, and then trying to introduce them, probably for most of them in the second and third game, and that's going to be a challenge for them to learn things as quickly as they possibly can, and a challenge for us in terms of when we introduce those players and who it's great that they're involved in domestic semi-finals and finals and European finals, but it's a challenge for them to get up to speed quickly as well. Well, the thing about travelling to New Zealand is in June is you just do not know what sort of weather you're going to get. I mean, I think in the last few days I've been looking at the weather forecast. They've had some great weather, and then the 2 weeks previous to that they were sort of on the backlash of a cyclone. So the thing with New Zealand is that you could be lucky and you could get days of lovely days, and you could get rain for a whole week. So we've got to be prepared to be able to handle that. And looking at the side, I mean, the idea is that we want to go out there and play rugby, and we want to take the All Blacks on. And the All Blacks think that their point of difference for everyone else in the world is their type 5. Everyone talks about the ability of their backs, but they think it's the ability of their type 5 in terms of Dane Coles or Italic or Whitelock being able to pass the ball, their mobility around the field. We've got to be able to match that, and we think we've got a group of players that are able to do that. But the weather conditions may dictate, and if anyone wants to go back and have a look at some of the games from 2005, there was a couple of games played in some horrendous weather conditions, and so being able to play some rugby is great, but also being able to if we need to play some territory and be really direct, then hopefully we'll have the ability to be able to do that depending on what's thrown us from a weather point of view. Oh, if I look at the squad that I've got now at the moment, I think probably a couple of players and a couple of English players that I've got a huge amount of respect for. It was Martin Johnson was one of them, and Lawrence Dallaglio. I mean, I was lucky enough to coach Lawrence, and probably from a leadership point of view and a captaincy point of view, he's probably the best captain I've ever seen him being involved in the game. And Martin Johnson, obviously, someone who led from the front. And the thing about those two individuals, and there's a couple of other individuals, is that before England won the World Cup in 2003, England beat the All Blacks in Wellington in 2002, and that that psychological belief and confidence is massive. And when you look at the squad we've got a coach in Andy Farrell who's been involved in a couple of victories over the All Blacks, and also England and English players in 2012, and some of those involved, and obviously Ireland beating the All Blacks in Chicago last year. Look, that makes a massive difference in terms of that self-belief and confidence. But probably one of those two players would, if they were playing today, would be good enough to make the squad, definitely. Oh, I don't. Look, I'm a proud Kiwi, and very passionate about that. And so when the All Blacks are playing other nations, look, I'm wanting them to do well, and watching New Zealand teams and performing, whether it's the Commonwealth Games or the Olympics. You want the athletes to do very well, because that's the nature of it. But there's no mixed emotions about me being involved in a team playing against the All Blacks and wanting to do well. I'm incredibly motivated and to want to do that, and very much the family the same. And my son and wife, daughter often get asked, how do you feel about playing against All Blacks? Who you're supporting? And their answer is simple: we're supporting Dad, and the team comes first, or the family comes first, and wanting the Lions to do well, and or if it's Wales, wanting Wales to do well. So no mixed emotions. I am desperate for the Lions to go to New Zealand, and if we can play well and do well and come away with a Test series victory, that it would be unbelievable. My fondest, probably 2013. We were in the airport. Not sure if it was Brisbane or Melbourne. I can't quite remember. And the players had a little bit of a court session in terms of a few fines, and seeing the players perform a dance off in the middle of a crowded sort of Qantas lounge room was something quite special. So if you can imagine all the players around, and I think Dan Lydiard and I can't remember a few others sort of having this dance-off competition with the players all cheering them on, probably was one of the memories that I won't forget. And people with phones out taking pictures and photographs. It was a pretty special moment. I couldn't tell you who the worst player was to room with. It's something you have to talk with the players, and what we tend to do is that, particularly at the start of the tour, we may select players to room with, who they're rooming with, and that, particularly the first few days. But we then tend to leave it to the players, so that we'll have a rooming committee, and they will look at the putting sort of differences in players together. So, if you are a player on tour and you don't want to be rooming with someone because they're not the best roommate, you probably got to suck up to the guys in charge of the rooming list, in terms of to make sure you don't get room with someone that you're not, that's not a great. I'm not saying that it's not sort of too popular, but obviously, you get different forwards and backs, and sometimes you get guys who are incredibly messy, guys who, stay up late, watch a bit of television, snore terribly, and if you get a couple of delicate players who like to keep things a bit tidy, like to go to bed a bit earlier, can't handle someone who's been a bit loud and snoring, you can get a little bit of not disagreement, but a bit of anxiety about who they've been rooming with. So it creates a huge amount of interest in the players, but it's definitely up to the players to make that decision about who they room with. Yeah, that's a really hard one, given what we think is the strength of the squad. But probably if I look at the moment, one player that's it's really impressed me and has matured in the last 4 years as a player and experience is Owen Farrell. I think his ability to play 10 and 12 with England, his goal kicking has been outstanding. So it's a tough call to make. But in saying that, he may not even start in the Test. You get someone like Johnny Sexton, fighting for that number 10 position, and Dan Biggar as well. So could potentially get it wrong, and then hopefully there's going to be other players that we don't expect just going to come out of the blue and have a sensational tour, and that would be absolutely outstanding. I'm really looking forward to the number 8 battle between Talupu Faletau and Billy Vunipola. That should be pretty exciting. And then look at the nines, the competition there. A lot of players. Stuart Hogg, Six Nations Player of the Year, has been outstanding from an attacking point of view. But there's going to be some real fights on the players' hands in terms of who's going to finally get selected, which from our point of view, from a coaching point of view, is absolutely great, because it's going to create that competition. And let's just hope maybe someone does come out of the blue and that I'm wrong, and we get a superstar on tour that just takes the series by storm, and comes away with a reputation enhanced and having been sensational in New Zealand. I don't know. I mean, I think in 2013, we went to Sydney Opera House afterwards, and it was a pretty quiet affair. And then we just went back to the hotel and had a quiet drink, and everyone was out at some bar in Sydney, and the players are all there and swimming in some swimming pool on the 3rd or 4th floor, and the other staff were there. But I just went back to the hotel quietly. I think if you recall back in 2013, it was quite a tough last week for myself in terms of the pressure and the criticism. But look, I think that after the tour is about getting away from it, sort of having a bit of a break, and but definitely if we do win the series, I can tell you that for all of us it'll be a reasonably late night, where we hopefully can enjoy each other's company and celebrate what will be an incredibly hard earned victory against the best team in the world and away from home.